Mike Zimmer is a part of the Jackson State coaching staff. There's not many quarterbacks on the Deacon Jones Award watch list, and Kenny Monday was a fantastic hire going into Morgan State's first wrestling season in 25 years. Oh, yeah, it's Locked on HBCU. Play my music.
You are Locked on HBCU, your daily podcast covering HBCU sports. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, family? Welcome back to another episode of the Locked on HBCU podcast, your number one. Daily one-stop shop for everything HBCU athletics, Monday through Friday, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And I, of course, am Darian Gray, a.k.a. the Mouth of the South, Texas Southern alum and former TSU Herald Sports editor. Thank you for going on this journey with me, making Locked on HBCU your first listen of the day every day. And you can follow me on Twitter at South Exclusives, because just because the mic cuts off does not mean that the journey is over. Now, Mike Zimmer is a part of the Jackson State coaching staff, and this is a major move. And I understand that Deion Sanders gets a lot of attention for bringing in high-profile athletes and self-promoting in a way that a lot of SWAC coaches simply do not have the platform to do. This move right here lines up with one of his better achievements in his career at Jackson State over the last 2 seasons. This is major because you have to understand, more than just bringing NFL scouts and coaches the eyes to Jackson State, he has now brought in an NFL caliber coach to Jackson State just 7 months ago, not even a full year, just 7 months ago. Mike Zimmer was the head coach for the Minnesota Vikings. So when I say NFL caliber, this isn't years and years ago. This isn't a guy who's been out of coaching for a couple of years and he's making his return. This is a guy who is still fresh off an NFL tenure. 7 months, guys, literally the last season. There's not been an NFL season that has been played that Mike Zimmer has not coached in like the last 30 years. His experience is ridiculous. And I'm going to be real with you. If you were excited, which many of us were, but if you were excited for Hugh Jackson going to Grambling, I cannot think of a logical reason that you would not be excited for Mike Zimmer being at Jackson State. All right. I had another way I was going to say it, but I think that I'm going to put it that way. I cannot think of a logical way or a logical reason you would be excited for Hugh to Grambling, but not Zimmer to Jackson State. He has a litany of experiences that he can share with his team. He's not even going to be the head coach, so he doesn't have to worry about the stresses of week-to-week game planning and what you're going to do about each opponent. He can just hone in and give his experience and give his expertise to this defensive back room. This is phenomenal because he was a defensive backs coach, and then he upgraded to being a defensive coordinator, and then he upgraded to being a head coach. Now, the way that Prime brings in these scouts and coaches and these big companies to have eyes on Jackson State is through relationships. That's the same way that he was able to bring Mike Zimmer here. When you look at Mike Zimmer, he said, I'm not getting paid a lot for this. This is not a job that I'm getting big bank for. Don't get it confused. I did this because I love Deion and I'll do anything for Prime. That's him. That's what he said. So it's not as if he's doing this collect the check. I told you, he just got off of a tenure with the Minnesota Vikings. This is a move that should only help that room, and the relationship between the two of them, it started in the 90s when Zimmer was the defensive backs coach for the then Cowboy Deion Sanders at the time. And that relationship has manifested itself in a couple of different ways. On one hand, they were a player-coach relationship. That's how it started. But then they become friends where they go in each other's houses. You have Coach Sanders. Well, I guess he wasn't coach at the time, but he was Deion Sanders calling Coach Zimmer in the middle of a press conference 2 times, because Zimmer didn't pick up the first time. So he calls him again. And now you're seeing where Coach Sanders is the head coach, and Zimmer is essentially, quote unquote, under him on the staff as an analyst, and he's working for what isn't a lot of money. He's doing it out of love. Like he said, I love Deion and I'll do anything for him. So you're just seeing how this relationship has manifested over the time of 25 years, you know? And one thing that I did find a little interesting about what was Zimmer's introductory press conference was a quote he said about his knowledge on HBCUs. Mike Zimmer said he wasn't well aware of HBCUs until Deion got there. Now, that's a little bit interesting. It has a couple of emotions going through my head at the same time, a little bit of surprise, a little bit of unsurprised, a little bit of disappointment. It can really go a lot of different ways, and I'll break it down. I'm more surprised that he said it as opposed to actually feeling it. This isn't something that nobody has said before. This isn't the first person to ever say they weren't much aware of HBCUs. However, this is a former NFL coach as of 7 months ago. Now, that's the lack of surprise, but the surprise that he said it. Those are the two emotions. But when you look at disappointment, sometimes I'd rather things not be confirmed. See, I already felt as if HBCU players weren't really being evaluated fairly, right? But now it seems as if they're not evaluating at all. Zimmer has been in the league as a positional coach, a coordinator, and a head coach for nearly 30 years. For him to not know much about HBCU athletes, what does that say about the scouting of HBCU athletes? Now, ideally, and maybe I'm naive, I'm young, right? So maybe I'm being naive. But I believe that as a scout in the NFL, you should turn over every stone. Now, my idea was that that HBCU stone, it was turned over, but it wasn't really looked at thoroughly. Okay, that's cool. I expected that. It's kind of how I feel about a lot of smaller schools and things of that nature. But to me, it sounds like they didn't even turn over the stone. You're a professional coach. You should have some knowledge of HBCUs. You're not a regular civilian. You're a coach who has scouts, and your scouts should go and try to find these hidden gems. And it shouldn't be a lack of knowledge as a professional football coach. And I'll say that, right? So that was a little bit of disappointment on that side. But hey, I'm trying this thing where I don't focus on the past too much when change is occurring. I try to let myself be consumed by the change, and I'm going to allow myself to be consumed by this change. And that's Mike Zimmer coming to an HBCU. All right, you didn't know much about it, whatever. Now you're here. Now you're a part of it. And the coaches, or excuse me, the players are so much better for it. These football players are so much better to have his expertise, the litany of experiences that he's had. They're so much better for that. Deion Sanders, Mike Zimmer, this defensive backfield, it's going to be good. It's going to be very good, and I'm excited for it. So we'll see exactly how it transpires. But Mike Zimmer to Jackson State is a big stinking deal, and we have to act like it. I don't care if he's just an analyst. He'll be able to trampoline these players into certain situations. The reputation of Mike Zimmer as a respected mind should get the cosign of him, should get these players in front of some eyes they might not have been in front of before. I love this move. I think that this is a fantastic move for Deion Sanders, for Jackson State. This is a NFL coach. This is a coach who probably could have got a job in the NFL, maybe not as a head coach, but in some capacity. And he's here on an HBCU campus giving our HBCU athletes not only another look, but then also some information that they can improve and make that game tape look even better. I'm here for it. I love it. Absolutely. Going forward, we're going to be talking about the surprise about there being not many quarterbacks on the Deacon Jones Award watch list. That shocked me. With as valuable as the quarterback position is, we only have 5 out of 49 players. And I got a couple of players I think could have been taken off in place of some quarterbacks. And we'll talk about that going forward. But first, this is a PSA. Please do not drink and drive. It is simple. Listen, you might be out, you get a couple of drinks, a few turns into a few too many, or you might just be questioning it. If you're on the fence, do not drive. We have Uber. There's a city transportation in my city. You got Lyft. You got friends. If you see somebody about to drive drunk, Don't allow them, because that's going to be on your conscience as well. Let's just use the tools that are there for us. I don't care if you live close. I don't care if you're thinking, oh, they might pull me over. The worst thing that can happen is not them pulling you over. The worst thing that can happen is them not pulling you over. And let's just think about that. Let's use our sense, even though I know sometimes, drinking takes the sense away. Let somebody take your keys. Have a designated driver if you plan on going out to drink. Make sure you're going to get an Uber. Do something, because these are the risks of driving drunk. Changing not only your life, but the life of multiple others with one bad decision. Don't drive sober. Get pulled over. Rolling on today's episode of Locked on HBCU, and I thank you for making us your first listen of the day every day. And let me give you the word of the day. Today's word of the day is litany, meaning a lengthy list. And there is a litany of names on the Deacon Jones Award watch list. But one thing that was very curious to me was the decision to not have a lot of quarterbacks. There was only 5 quarterbacks on this list. Now, this isn't a list that's overly biased in its history, its short history, right? You've had 4 award winners, only 2 of them quarterbacks. Now, you've had a running back on there. You've had a wide receiver on there. Of the 6 seasons, the 2 quarterbacks both got 2 apiece. So you could say 4 seasons are made up by quarterbacks. But of the 4 recipients, there's only 2 quarterbacks. It's not an overly biased award. When we look at the history of MVPs, when you look at history of just jobs and things like that, you always have one facet that is perceived as more valuable. And the acknowledgement typically goes to them, right? You have a boss. All the work that happens underneath the boss gets credit for a lot of times because they are perceived as the more valuable. You look at the quarterback. A lot of things have to go right for the quarterback to go right. How many quarterbacks do you feel like you've personally seen whose progress or their ability to be the player that you think they are has been stunted by poor environment, whether that's coaching, line, skill players, whatever you feel like that is, scheme, which goes into coaching, right? Your progress can be stunted. However, when everything goes right, it's going to that quarterback. If it's not going to that quarterback, it's probably going to that coach. Whoever that top dog on your team is, the credit and the blame goes to that person. So when we're looking at the value of the quarterback position, I would assume that if you're going to list off 49 names that you should be watching, you would say more than 5 are quarterbacks. I'm not saying that 40 of the 49 need to be quarterbacks. It's not 40 good quarterbacks in HBCU football, right? Well, it's not 40 teams. So, of course, not 40 good quarterbacks, right? But you're not looking at 20, even that. You're not looking for that. I just thought that 5 was small. Now, mind you, this is just a watch list. This is not the finalists. This is not the only people they have to pick from. If Joe Blow from Connecticut State just came out and was like, I'm balling, I'm throwing 5,000 yards this year, 50 touchdowns in 10 games. If that's what we're doing, then he's going to get it, even though he wasn't on the list. So these are not the only pool of players. So if you look at the pool of players, which I suggest you do, and you don't see anybody from your school or you don't see a particular player that was deserving of this honor, don't get too upset. I'm only here talking about it at length because I noted that it just was not a lot of quarterbacks, but not one player in particular is going to make me just go off and say, man, why isn't this, that, and the third happening? Because I understand that any player can surprise, right? But overall, the quarterbacks aren't even top 3 in positions as far as who has the most, right? So you have quarterbacks at 5, but wide receivers are 10. There's 10 wide receivers on this list. There's 8 running backs on this list. There's 7 linebackers. That's the one that really threw me. Now, mind you, y'all know I love linebackers, so there's no disrespect on that side of it. However, there's 7 linebackers. You would not have been able to convince me before reading this list. There will be more linebackers on the most outstanding player in Black college football list, watch list, than quarterbacks. You just I wouldn't have seen that, right? So I think this is great. And that lack of quarterbacks, in a way, actually kind of points to one of the greatest things about this list, and that's the diversity. See, I'm coming in what I expected. Who knows? Maybe I'm old-fashioned. Maybe I'm just sitting here saying, well, quarterbacks are the leader of the team. Quarterbacks are this, quarterbacks are that. Let's put quarterbacks on this list. But you sitting here saying, you know what? We're going to spread the love because there are so many great players in Black college football who don't play quarterback. That's one of the better things about it. When you look at the diversity, all the conferences are spread out pretty well. Let's look at them. You got the MEAC at 13, the SWAC at 13. So they're right there tied. I'll stop right there for a second. A lot of times when we're looking at this list, when we're looking at all pro list, how many times have you looked at an all pro list and seen there's significantly more SWAC players than MEAC players? I know I've came on this episode, or excuse me, on this show, and I've talked about it at times. When I'm looking at the best players in college football from all these publications, it's SWAC over MEAC a lot of times. That's not the case here. So I think it's worthy to point that out. Now, you're looking at 10 SEAC players, 8 players from the CIAA, 3 players from the OVC, so really Tennessee State. And then you also have 2 players from Hampton in the CAA. So when you're looking at, there's no North Carolina A&T representation. So there's no Big South. It's interesting. They are a team that is expected to win their conference this year. It would be the first one to win the conference in over 20 years if that was the case, but there is no North Carolina A&T representation, and I don't have a name off the top of my head to give you, so I'm not going to complain too hard about it, but I will tell you there's not any North Carolina A&T representation here. And every positional group is represented. Offense, every positional group. Defense, every positional group. Special teams even has 2 people who are on here. And I think that's where it really gets me is, let's be real, okay? That punter out of Fayetteville State is not winning the Deacon Jones Award. He's not. How good does a punter have to be to win the most outstanding player in college football? Like, let's just think about that. Then you have a kick returner in Isaiah Bolden. I don't think he's winning it. And it's no disrespect to him, but it's like, even in Devin Hester's best year, I'm not thinking MVP. Now I'll cut him a little bit of slack because he has the ability to, impact the game on offense. So he at least has that. But as a kick returner, how great does your year have to be? I just don't think that those 2 positions provide realistic chances to being a most outstanding player in black college football. I just don't think that's the case. So I'm looking at a punter. Come on, y'all. A punter. I just don't think that's realistic. I like that he's there. I appreciate it. But if we're capping it at 49, I'm taking a punter and I'm taking a kick returner off in favor of a quarterback who I believe have more realistic shots. Andrew Body, Corey Fields. Now, what they essentially did for this list was they took the best quarterback from each conference. So you're looking at them. Let's see. You got Draylon Ellis at Tennessee State, who's representing the Independents. You have Independents. You have Shedeur Sanders, Jackson State for the SWAC. Davius Richard, North Carolina Central for the MEAC. You have Deontay Bano, not Alcorn State, but Albany State for the SEAC. And you have Kari Lane out of Fayetteville State representing the CIAA. So you have the best quarterbacks from each, but why don't we get the 2 best quarterbacks? Why don't we have the first and second team quarterbacks from each conference? I think that's fair. That'll give you 9 if you include Draylon Ellis. You have 2 from the SEAC, CIAA, SWAC, MEAC, and then Tennessee State. If you don't want to bring in another quarterback from one of the independents, that's okay. I get it. But yeah, why not that? That makes sense to me. I think they all deserve to be on the watch list. The 2 best quarterbacks, 2 players who can get all conference honors. To me, that just would have made more sense. But overall, I appreciate the diversity. I think it's a great thing. But if we're capping it off at 49, you're going to have a tough job selling me that a punter and a kick returner have a better shot, better odds at being or deserving of being on the most outstanding player watch list than 2 quarterbacks. Especially because I know a guy like Andrew Body is talented. I'm not saying that punter isn't good, but come on, man. If he averages 7 seconds in the air and he has 60-yard punts and he has a bunch of coffin corners, we're going to appreciate him for being one of the greatest punters or one of the best punters in the nation. But he's not going to get serious consideration for the player of the year. I just don't think it's realistic, which is why I don't think he should be on this list. But if he is going to be on this list, let's bump it up. 49 is a weird number anyway. Let's take it to a 50. I'll leave it at that. All right, so that's what I think we should do. But I'm just surprised overall with 49 players, only 5 of them are at the quarterback position. It's a bit strange. Let me know what you think down below. And Morgan State has found their wrestling coach in Kenny Monday. This is a fantastic hire, and I'm extremely excited for the wrestling season that is coming up in 2023. I'll tell you about all that as we wrap up today's episode of Locked On HBCU. We're wrapping up today's episode of Locked On HBCU, and we're going to be discussing Morgan State Wrestling. They will be kicking off their program in 2023. Now, with that being the case, you have to get yourself a head coach. And they just brought in a phenomenal hire in Kenny Monday, the first ever Black Olympic gold medalist in wrestling. Now, this is major. Now, we have to understand there's been a 25-year hiatus. And when you're bringing in a new coach, let alone upstarting a program, who is going to be your head coach is going to be very important because you got to get people to buy in. And that's one of the reasons I think Monday is a phenomenal hire, because you look at it from two different perspectives, and he's hitting 100. He's getting extra credit. You're looking at one, the importance to the demographic, and then two, his credibility. Credibility will never hurt you. I've never heard somebody say somebody is too credible to speak on that. Never heard. I've heard you're not credible enough, but you've done these things. You can speak on them. I also kind of hate when people use that credibility thing against people. Like, you ain't got no credibility. Credibility does not only come from personal experience, right? That is not the case. We do this all the time. Like, I hear so many people say, that media personality, they ain't never done it. How can they speak on it? Man, listen. Same people who say that be the same people speaking on it, just not publicly on a television screen. It's silly logic. Shout out to everybody who listens, even if it's just one or two people on this episode. I appreciate you for never, ever saying that to me. Nobody has ever said that to me, and I appreciate it. I'll probably delete your comment, but nobody has ever said that to me. I don't know. I might respond, but I appreciate it because it's tired. It's a terrible narrative. Just because you never played that sport at the highest level doesn't mean you can't have an opinion on it, because most people who criticize people for not playing that sport at the highest level have never played at the highest level. So let's just allow people to have opinions. But you take that further into the coaching world, right? Let's get off of that tangent and bring it back. Listen, there's coaches who are better coaches, better communicators of the game than they were players. I understand that. Some people try to knock it, especially when that coach isn't that successful. That's not a problem with Kenny Monday. See, on the same note that I understand that that's the case, there's also players and athletes, depending on what sport it is, that need to see that you can actually take that and put it into action, right? They want to believe that what you're doing is telling them the right thing. And with Kenny Monday, there should be no doubt, because he has the resume that anybody at the age of 18, 19, 20, they're going to look and immediately say, oh, he knows what he's doing. He's teaching me the right things. I can trust in that. I can trust that Kenny Monday is going to do this. We have to remember, what did I introduce him as? The first ever Black Olympic gold medalist when it comes to wrestling. He didn't stop there, but we're talking about a 25-year hiatus, and you have to nail this coaching hire because you're the only one in this space, the only D1 HBCU wrestling program. You have to nail it. Who you going to get? And you get the first ever Black Olympic gold medalist. Thank you very much. That is a great hire. That is a great hire. Now, when we look at what else he's done, he is a 3-time Olympian, which lets you know he was wrestling at a high level for at least 8 to 12 years, right? But let's look at his resume beyond that. Because I'm telling you, these are things that if you're talking about going to Morgan State, you're going to look at it. What did he do when he was wrestling? So let's look at that, right? Let's see how he can teach properly. 3-time Olympian. He's in the Hall of Fame. NCAA champion, 84. Gold medalist in 88. Silver medalist in 92. USA freestyle champion in 85, 88, 91, and 96. This man has won on multiple levels over the span of 12 years. He is credible. You question his credibility, I'm going to have to question your credibility, and I don't try to pull that. But if you question the credibility of this man, what is yours? That's what I got to know, right? So I can trust him. Now to the importance of the demographic. We're talking HBCU wrestling. Yeah, we're talking Morgan State specifically, but let's widen the scope a little bit. We're talking about HBCU wrestling. Who do you think that demographic is geared towards? It's geared towards Black wrestlers. Ain't no problem in it, but that's the truth. You think that young Black wrestlers, they're not going to have a reaction to having the first ever Black Olympic gold medalist in wrestling? Listen, I can read off that resume and you can ooh and all you want if you're not into wrestling, right? But if you're into wrestling, his name rings bells. 100%. He's going to command respect. You know, like I can list off that Tom Brady has won 7 Super Bowls, and to somebody who's not in the football, oh, that's a lot of rings. Okay, that's pretty good. But I say that to a football head, and they understand 7 Super Bowls. Tom Brady done won more Super Bowls than any team has ever won. So let's acknowledge the impact and the influence that he has in that community, in that domain, one that I can't even fully understand. Right. So this is a big deal. And I know that there's people out there who are idolizing him, who are sitting there saying, man, Kenny Monday? Oh, I'd love to get coached by him. This is a once in a lifetime type of opportunity. Right. So I love it. And listen, if you thought I was hyped for gymnastics, just imagine me in 2023 when we talking about that. And yes, I'll be here in 2023. Like my boy Diddy said, we ain't going nowhere. All right, now I ain't got the vocals like that, so excuse it, but we ain't going nowhere. We can't be stopped now. All right, I'm just gonna say it. I ain't gonna sing it anymore. I ain't gonna put y'all through that. But what I will say is that we're gonna be here in 2023, and I will be out of my chair and out of my skin with excitement. See, I don't be knowing really what's going on with gymnastics. I enjoy watching it. It looks good. It looks graceful. I'm like, wow, these women and these fellas are really graceful. They're great. But I can't tell you what's good and bad. People get a 5. I'm like, man, it was a 10 in my eyes. I thought it was great. You know, it's got to be something drastic for me to really tell, oh, nah, she kind of slipped up or he kind of slipped up on that. With wrestling, I'm a huge MMA guy. So there's a little bit of a base there, right? I practiced some martial arts back in my day. So there's a little bit of a base there. I don't know all the point system, but I can sit there and tell you when somebody getting out wrestled for the most part, visually, right? Man, I'm about to be over the moon with the excitement. I might have to go to some high school tournaments just to get my mind right in preparation for this. But this is major because I'm gonna be dialed in. This is one-on-one. I'm better than you. Listen, you got to understand. There's a reason I love combat sports, and wrestling gives me part of that feeling. This is a sport that I'm extremely excited for. I might not know all the points, like I said, but I love to watch it. Sometimes I'll be scrolling. I've seen the Big Ten championship just scroll around my TV a couple of times, and I don't be knowing the points. I see when they flick up on the little scoreboard, but I enjoy watching it. I enjoy watching the wrestling tournaments. So I can't wait till Morgan State has it. I will try my best to fly out to one of these, and hopefully they have one in Texas, so I don't have to fly because them tickets ain't no joke. But anyway, the point is, I'm excited for this move. Kenny Monday is a phenomenal hire. He is going to bring a lot of credibility that should bring in recruits. And then also being the first Black Olympic gold medalist, when you're catering and kind of marketing yourself to young Black wrestlers, that is a great, great, great move. And I think it should benefit them highly. I appreciate you for making us your first listen of the day. With that, now for your second listen of the day, make sure you're checking out our conference shows, Locked on ACC, Locked on SEC, Locked on Pac-12, Locked on Big 12. They're putting out great work, so make sure you're tuning in to all of our phenomenal Locked on hosts. Now, in the meantime, in between time, if you're looking for me, you can find me on Twitter at South Exclusives. Until the next time that we hear each other, family, take care, stay blessed. Peace.